a little bit against the idea of needing an absolute brute who just sits there and wins the ball, and why I think you can have two players like Bergvall and Gibbs-White. Maybe, as I say, when you go to Anfield, you might need to solidify the back line a little bit, and so that's when you need a João Paulinho or a Douglas Luiz, if João Gomez, whoever. But when you play in certain games like at home to Burnley and these sorts of games, and even I use games like at home to teams like Manchester United, teams that are good. I'm talking separate the real elite teams to everyone else. You can play like this if you play a 3, certainly, because you have that protection behind you. So yeah, I mean that's and it's certainly an interesting way of looking at it. That if they are going to set up with a 3, and that Gibbs-White almost becomes one of 5 attackers with Pedro Porro as well. And I think the only difference that I would make, and where, don't get me wrong, the wingers, they're not solely, glued inside, but more often than not, Tell will probably be where Gibbs-White is. It's my, humble opinion, which I think probably removes that space for Gibbs-White, unless Gibbs-White, as we say, is the one that runs the channel himself, or Udogie's the one that builds up. So I think more often than not, and this is, I can't move this because it's a screenshot, but Udogie will be where Tell is, and Tell will be where Gibbs-White is. And Gibbs-White will probably be in the area where the 6 is, if that kind of makes a little bit more sense. And that 6 maybe drops a little bit deeper. So I think that's probably more likely, but that's not to suggest that this isn't, And then you look here, this is when you've got a 4 at the back. He said that if you're... Now, this can be either with or without the ball. In this, the goalkeeper's got the ball. You're pressing, but it's compact. Jan Vertonghen said it when Pochettino was here. He said it years ago that, I can't remember what the exact measurement was, but the distance between him and Harry Kane had to constantly be the same. If Kane moved, you moved, and you shifted in this compact group. And Thomas Frank does that. When they don't have the ball, they tend to sit in a 4-4-2. It's quite common for them. It's compact. It's probably the most compact formation you're going to have. And Gibbs-White might move into that second number 9 spot. Again, could be Tell. It could be that Gibbs-White then shifts out left. And as I say, we'll probably have a better understanding of a lot of these things, Gibbs-White or not, tomorrow. Obviously, Gibbs-White's not going to be there, but you'll get this sort of system idea. And so I'm quite excited to see, how that'll work. And so it's about learning when these guys have got press, because this Andrew system was all about you're just going to keep running, you're going to keep going, you're going to keep pressing. And that wasn't sustainable a lot of the time. And so this is going to be different. This is about triggers. This is about, okay, when he gets the ball, or when this is what I have to do when this person moves. And this is, and so he does dumb the game down. It does make it simple for people to understand, because, as I say it quite often, that it's, a game that is made way too complicated sometimes. But he also needs intelligent footballers to go, I'm going to take responsibility. And Gibbs-White's going to take responsibility and go, I'm stepping up. I've got 2 behind me. I've got 3 behind them, and Udogie, Van der Ven, Romero, whoever. I can now push on and go, I'm going to press. So, I mean, I'm quite pro playing 3 at the back next year or next season. Whether or not that'll be something that gets used more often than not, I don't know. I would like it to be. I think there's a very big difference between playing 3 at the back and 5 at the back. I think 5 instantly sounds like you're negative and you're very defensive and you're Antonio Conte's sort of style of football. But saying that you play a 3, which is exactly the same, instantly becomes you've got these wing backs that bomb down the lines and all this. And Pochettino did it for a large amount of time. He had Vertonghen and Alderweireld, who are both brilliant, intelligent footballers, and good on the ball and comfortable. And Davinson Sanchez, who was a little bit less comfortable on the ball, but he was an unbelievable tackler for a while, and he was an unbelievable defender. That they said he was quick, and they said to him, "You're gonna run, you're gonna chase, and you're gonna win the ball." And that back 3, certainly in those like kind of Wembley years and whatever, and it works really well. So that's something I could certainly see, like with Van der Ven being the quick one, and Romero being more of a sweeper, that he's slightly more calm and controlled and comfortable on the ball. That if they had another one as a Barney, who's quite a tough tackler but also competent enough on the ball, it could be a really interesting dynamic.
100%. No, I do agree, and I think it's worth pointing out, Frank, that as per Jonathan Mills' comment here around some teams, we will play a 5 at the back and do the low block. You said about obviously, 5 at the back sounds negative, but it's actually more positive as we look, in the last, especially in this one. That's technically, a 4 at the back, that one, but the 5 at the back, where it comes into, where the grey is there, whether that's a Danzo maybe. Actually, it's quite positive. Look, you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 players there in the attack. Udoji sort of bombing up and down the line there was almost like the wing back. Porro's even further up. And I think this one as well, maybe one point to make it, Frank, and correct me if you think I'm wrong, is that because this is so all out in a sense, and it obviously depends who we're playing. Maybe we'll see this type of formation against Burnley when we're trying to counter a low block. But actually, that is subject to counterattacks. I think back to the game against Bournemouth, I think it was last season or the season before, where we lost 3-2 and we absolutely capitulated at home. And it's because we played so high up with Ange. We got absolutely exploited, especially down the left-hand side. And they just absolutely sprinted at Porro. They gave him an absolute nightmare. And they managed to get through round the back so many different times. And my concern here, again, obviously these are screenshots. We can't actually point them out, unfortunately, because we haven't got Ryan here. But, do you not have a bit of a concern down that Porro side, especially when we're playing more on the front foot, that we could get counted down that side, especially?
Yeah, I do a little bit. But I think this is where the system is maybe going to be slightly different. And to what we saw, as I say, the instant difference last year is we had 2 people back at all times, more often than not. It was usually the centre halves, and maybe one of the fullbacks was doing everything in their power to get back. But usually one of the fullbacks was jogging back because it wasn't, grained in them. They had to run back half the time, it felt like. And then that was a frustration. This will be different, I think, because especially if they have an actual 6 or they have someone sitting in that 2 of those double pivots or whatever it be, that kind of square in the middle of Van der Ven, Romero, Bergvall, and the 6 is really important, because if someone's breaking down this side where Porro is and Romero steps across, Bergvall can come in. And that's the difference. That whereas last year we had Bergvall kind of where Kudus is, and we had the 6 sometimes where Udoji is, and then we had James Maddison where Gibbs-White is, or whatever it be. And that was our midfield, which was a lack of a triangle, a lack of any shape at all. Now you have this sort of system where you go, okay, there's cover. So Porro can get forward, and Udoji can get forward. And so I think that will work. But yeah, so I do get the point. I think if it, as I say, it's easy to say. If it's coached properly, then it should be fine, because, there should be enough cover in the way that Thomas Frank wants to play, to be able to prevent proper counterattacks from taking place.
Sure. No, hopefully there is that sort of counter to the all-out attack, and the resilience is there. I think this one's quite interesting as well. Again, we haven't got. It's worth pointing out that it wasn't Frank or I that created these diagrams, so we're just trying to best explain. Ryan, who's the tactical analyst, unfortunately having a bit of tech problems, but it's interesting to see that Kudus could drop into the midfield at times on the attacks. Solanke's dropping deep to come and get the ball, but Tell is almost one of the most forward players in the lineup. Udoji and Porro obviously bombing down those wings. Van der Ven and Romero very much staying back more. Anything to add on this, Frank? And obviously then it goes to this point around that 6 working with Bergvall or whoever it may be. If it is an Archie Gray, if it is a Bentancur, there is options there. But Kudus almost coming in as a second 10, it looks like, almost here, rather than being a right winger, and almost Tell and Solanke being a front 2. So again, bit of fluidity there with maybe a 4-2-2-2, you could even call that. Not sure how likely that is, but interesting food for thought. What do you think?
Yeah, agreed. I think it's really interesting. I mean, I think what will happen is, if that is what you have in Tell and you have in Brennan Johnson, is players that can run, and our runners can play as a second striker. And so we might see this. We might see it on the flip side where, Johnson's the one that's running on where Kudus is, and in Tell's position, who's slightly deeper, playing like kind of in line where Kudus is, that you might have Wilson Odobert maybe. I mean, he mentioned Odobert in his first interview at Tottenham. Thomas Frank did, and said that he's a good player and he's an exciting player. He's one that played in the 10 for Burnley. He played in the 10 at the back end of last year, a little bit in the league when we were struggling with injuries and things. And so I think that's certainly something that we could see in that you're going to have one of the wingers is probably maybe going to drop at times. They're both going to be inside, but one of them might drop. Kudus of the two wingers in this scenario is probably more likely to do that because he can play in that 10 role. Tell's probably more of a runner on playing as almost a second striker. But yeah,
Tell also played. Sorry. Tell also played a lot up front for Bayern when he did get his run in. Cutting in from the left normally, but as almost the striker. So yeah, I think this naturally makes sense. And Kudus, like you said, can play in the 10 as well. Interesting if Kudus and Gibbs-White might link up well. Obviously, if Gibbs-White actually finally does get announced. And the final one was more around sort of looks like more, a progression on this, but how these are the passing lanes and the ways which Gibbs-White and Kudus could drop back and receive the ball from a Bergvall, as you can see from the yellow arrows. Solanke also sort of getting into the box, but also dropping deep to receive. Tell really playing really high up on that left-hand side and really getting supported by Udogie there. Exciting looking at this lineup. Anything to build on this one, Frank?
I mean, it's the same sort of thing again. It's having the sort of little triangle in midfield of your 6, Gibbs-White and Bergvall is important, as I say, because you've got that double pivot, which Ryan's made clear here, and I've said about quite a lot. Because you've got that double pivot, it allows Porro freedom, it allows you Dodgy freedom, it allows Gibbs-White or whoever the 10 is freedom, Kudus, Tell, Solanke. And it allows one of the double pivot actually a bit of freedom at times as well, because you've always got another one. Whereas last year, as I say, and I don't want to keep going back to last year because it is in the past now, we're changing it, but it's an easy comparison to make. That last year, so often you had no freedom if you were Bentancur playing on the 6 because no one else was actually around you, but then you still had to go and do other jobs and you were controlling a whole midfield on your own. And we got caught out a lot because of it. Now you've got that sense of freedom and that lack of hope. Sorry, that not lack of. Hopefully, they build up a trust in each other as well. I mean, that's why it's probably important to not. I worry a little bit if on the first day of the season you've got 2 of your midfielders brand new players, and so all of a sudden you start with Bergvall, Gibbs-White, and I don't know, Douglas Luiz in your midfield in the first day of the season. 3 that have never actually played together or done that role together. So I'm a little bit early on, because I think it's a role that midfield in this system is one that requires trust and requires experience together. Thomas Frank's never actually started at a club very well. Not to put it down or anything, but he didn't win. I think he won once in his first 10 at Brentford, and he won none, I think, of his first 8 or 9 at Bromby. So, I mean, Brentford fans wanted him gone and sacked after a little while, and then he turned it around. And so I don't think the same is going to happen now, because I think Tottenham have got a good side, and I think he's also far more experienced now than he was then, which is 7 or 8 years ago. But what it does show is that the systems that he's going to implement might take a bit of time, and so people need to probably temper their expectations a little bit. And if we're not top of the league at Christmas, then chill out. But yeah, I mean, as I say, that midfield is going to be one that's going to have to mature together, and it's going to be a young midfield, I imagine, because Gibbs-White's 25, 26. I could be wrong. I think he's about that. But Bergvall's obviously just turned 19 in the last couple of months. Gray's just turned 19 in the last couple of months. Sar's still young. If they go for Wharton or whoever, that it's going to be a young midfield. Kudus is still 24. Tell's 19, 20, whatever he is. It's a young side, and it's a side that under Thomas Frank, I think, will mature together and learn together. But it might take a little bit of time.